The relationship matters to us first and foremost.
I'm on a team that would sit down and say, where do you need the help? How can a real estate structure alleviate some pain that you're feeling?
We have trusted partners who look to us often in a first look or only look scenario that know that when they work with us, they can count on us to deliver.
Welcome to MedAxiom HeartTalk, the podcast where thought leaders come together for one ultimate goal: to continually transform and optimize cardiovascular care for all. MedAxiom HeartTalk starts now.
I'm Cheryl Toth, host of MedAxiom HeartTalk. Delivering state-of-the-art patient care and managing program growth are essential to success. Both often require the need to expand service offerings and implement new technologies, and frequently that impacts facility requirements. Whether it's a need to expand existing office space or acquire new real estate, CV programs need capital and property management expertise for a successful result. But it's the rare CV program or practice that has sufficient amounts of either in-house. That's where a real estate investment trust can help. We've invited two guests from MedAxiom partner Physicians Realty Trust, better known as DOC, to talk about how CV programs can partner with REITs to better manage their real estate portfolios. Publicly traded since 2013, DOC has invested in dozens of healthcare real estate projects nationwide in leading health systems, cancer centers, ASCs, and multi-tenant healthcare buildings. So joining us from Charleston, South Carolina today is Daniel Klein, Senior Vice President and Deputy Chief Investment Officer at DOC. Dan leads strategy for the investment team, pursues new acquisitions and developments, and builds new and existing relationships with DOC's health system and hospital partners, as well as with investors, developers, and advisors. Also with us from Atlanta, Georgia, is Mark Dukes, Vice President, Asset Management. Mark is responsible for the operations of a 200-building portfolio of healthcare assets across 30 states. The majority are medical office buildings affiliated with major healthcare systems such as Catholic Health Initiatives, Ascension Health, Baylor Scott and White Health, and Northside Hospital. Mark and Dan, welcome to MedAxiom HeartTalk.
Thanks, Cheryl. It's a privilege to be here.
Hi.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about DOC to kick things off, how you work with healthcare organizations and your roles. Let's start with you, Dan.
Thanks, Cheryl. I'll walk through the DOC story. We view ourselves as the real estate partner of choice for healthcare. DOC went public in 2013 with the acquisition of about $120 million of properties that were acquired from a Chicago-based investment firm with roots in Wisconsin, which is where we are headquartered today. That's historically a pretty small IPO size, but the company had a vision for creating this amazing medical office real estate company. And as a result, fast forwarding to today, 7 years later, we've constructed a portfolio of nearly $5 billion, which is spread across 268 properties in 36 states. We're a long-term investor, and that's theoretically in perpetuity. We are neither short-term holders nor flippers. Providing care to all ages of our population is going to require complex solutions and a lot of capital, to be honest. Healthcare spending being about 18% of GDP, which is staggering. That number was 6% in 1960. And we think the lion's share of that spending is going to occur in medical office buildings, and in particular, off-campus facilities. This year's construction starts are 72% off-campus. That's where the world's headed. And as we see it, yesterday's healthcare was hospital-centric, and tomorrow's healthcare is consumer-centric.
Yeah, so true. And well, let's turn to you, Mark, because Dan's talking about long-term investment. You take care of clients, and you have this expertise, and you're the one out there overseeing medical office buildings and facilities and your relationships across 30 states. What would you say sets you apart as a company when you work with your clients from other REITs?
I think it's our relationship approach. We're very focused on being partners with our providers. So my team and I work closely with practice managers on day-to-day operations, as well as with strategy and executives for hospital systems and large physician groups on space utilization and maximizing revenue. I don't know that our peers can say that. CV works into programming for us just with all of our specialties. And specifically, we focus on providing a safe, clean, well-managed environment for all practices. So, constantly communicating on how we're maintaining our facilities, a high focus on customer service and sharing our results in those areas, and focusing on ways that we can always improve.
Well, that's a great segue because we wanted to talk a little bit about safety today, and you're mentioning that. So, Mark, tell us about some of the general best practices for keeping a building safe, and what kind of safety precautions are you seeing across the country, especially given the context of COVID?
Yeah, great question. First, I'm really proud of our efforts here. So we mobilized a pandemic response team in January. We knew that this was, something big was happening, and I've been doing this for a long time, and definitely didn't think I would have another first in my career. But thankfully, I have experience preparing for and responding to other emergency situations, and I have a great team around me. So, we already clean at a higher standard in medical office. Both the solutions we use and the frequencies of accessing touch points. So the pandemic didn't change our need to sanitize to a higher standard. It was really the frequency of touch points like door handles and elevator call buttons and lobby furniture. And in a lot of cases, restricting or moving access to some of those gathering areas. So, following guidelines from the CDC and WHO and industry associations like BOMA that I'm heavily involved with, we set cleaning requirements and signage templates for our team early on. A challenge to staying proactive, consistent, and updated on regulatory guidance is that it's different often state by state. So really a big effort on just staying abreast of what's going on out there, what the various guidances are. And then executing consistently with more than 100 management people, some who work directly for DOC and some with other firms. So, we initially published guidance. We published signage for any kind of building issue that we could think of, both in English and Spanish. We built an online library that we update frequently. And our communication program was, I think, world class. So we started with daily calls that we've reduced to weekly. We made sure early on that if there was any incidents that it channeled to me, frankly, the director of all things COVID. So I was notified of, for example, any test positive early on, and I quarterbacked our response plan. We also made a commitment early on to notify the population of any test positive, which was interesting because, while we had considerable activity in that regard, we know that we aren't aware of every instance, but we felt a real responsibility to notify that there had been a test positive. Today, that's not as much of a news story as it was in April, May. But yeah, it was really interesting at the beginning of all this. We didn't know what we were up against, either did our healthcare partners. So, there's a whole host of practices to implement and, as importantly, communicate. And frankly, it's been a little nice to be at the forefront. We we don't get our goal is that our phone doesn't ring because there's issues. We really are proactive and take care of things, but we've been at the forefront for most of 2020 because of this.
Well, yeah, I kind of jotted down as you were listing the different things that you've done for your clients, not only the signage in multiple languages, but the online library, the communications, the weekly calls, the daily to weekly calls. That is so proactive. The average medical office manager or somebody in a building that's maybe a locally owned or managed building wouldn't have that kind of backup and support for their program, I would imagine. And I would expect that, we're seeing so many places and staff getting sort of COVID fatigued, just in general. So, what are you suggesting to programs who are wanting to maintain that high alert on safety or aiming to do better? How are you helping them educate staff, motivate staff? I don't know. What kinds of things are you doing to keep them propped up?
Yeah, we're just staying steadfast in our outreach just to make sure we're here to help. I mean, we've done things this year like donate PPE that we happen to have at times when we knew some of our practices were struggling to find that. We've maintained just some of that soft touch, the tenant relations, cookie delivery, any of those things, just to kind of tell our frontline workers how much we appreciate them. We've done that for our frontline workers too. We had maintenance technicians who put on the uniform and put on a mask and went in every day and took care of areas where we know we're in healthcare. I mean, we maintain buildings with sick people all the time, but these guys didn't know what they were really walking into. So it's been a personal mission of mine to make sure that those folks know how much we appreciate them. We do have large facilities with large systems, but we have a lot of small tenants too. So we've done a special outreach to some of the smaller practice groups just so that they know we're here to help them. I love solving problems and taking care of people. So there's been as much of a reward here as there have been angst and pain. It's been a rewarding year to know that we've been able to do this and keep people safe and keep facilities safe.
That's great. You're doing so many specific things, and I sort of feel that it is you're speaking from your heart when you say you want to help. And I wonder, Dan, on your side of things, when you're talking to investors and doing business development, how do you weave in this kind of depth of expertise, depth of field, and desire to truly support your clients in the communications with them as you're looking to partner with new health systems and ASCs, et cetera?
Well, thanks, Cheryl. As I said earlier, we view ourselves as healthcare's real estate partner of choice. And maybe I can give you a little example of how that plays out, and that'll come back to answer your question. The most transformational deal that we did was a multi-transaction monetization of hospital assets of what was in 2016 CHI. Now it's part of Common Spirit. In some ways, that transaction put us on the map. And Mark Dukes did most of the work on that transaction. But that was, I think still is, the largest provider monetization ever, and we're proud of that deal. We were a smaller firm at the time, and we were asked to provide a solution for the real estate for these hospital providers across many regions. And we put together a couple transactions over a couple-year period, and eventually acquired over 60 properties in about 9 states for about $1 billion. We can do that on a large scale. We can do that on a small scale. We offer solutions to physician-owned real estate and physician investors, so they can invest in their properties through either a sale leaseback or some other kind of structured sale to us. And we can offer what are, in essence, share and dividend equivalent units in our company for any seller that wants to maintain, an interest in Physicians Realty Trust going forward. And we do that in some situations as well. And so we're here to help provide capital to the real estate side of this equation, so that capital can be, used and deployed better by the providers for care and other priorities they have in the growth of their business and their strategies.
And Mark, what does it mean to be a good neighbor to other tenants in a medical office building during COVID? We've talked about safety. How are you fostering good neighborship, if you will, amongst your clients out there?
That's a good question. We've had challenges from time to time too, because we now are back at full staffing, but we had periods of time where just monitoring what was going on in the buildings and being able to be, in person and take care of people where it was, was tough to pull off, just because we wanted to keep our associates safe as well. But there's a few things that come to mind. I mean, first of all, just recognizing everybody is stressed and overworked and understaffed and having to overpay for, travel labor and temp labor. Some things that I would say make practices within multi-tenant buildings, which is a large part of our portfolio, the way that they can help each other and be more neighborly. One would be take ownership of your staff and patients. If there's especially around social distancing. And a few examples that come to mind are scheduling. So we've had some patient practices that from the very beginning have done a great job of implementing scheduling programs whereby you don't come into the building and wait for your appointment in common areas or overfill a waiting room within the patient practice that spills out into the common areas. But there's still a lot of practices that aren't doing that. I think that is one great thing that a practice can do generally, but also for their neighbors. So just managing their flow and managing staff accordingly. It's one thing to just say always keep your distance and wear PPE, but if there's entrances that staff should be coming in and out of, and then the scheduling system, I think those are relatively easy to implement. I haven't been there, so I can't say that, but it seems that if we are all trying to be better neighbors with each other, that would be a really great way.
Yeah, that's really great. Dan, what would you add from your perspective on good neighborship and to other tenants in one of your buildings?
Mark is the expert, maybe knows more nationally than anybody in this subject. I would be foolish to add to what he said to that. It was spot on.
No, it's perfect.
I can add one more thing, Cheryl.
Yeah.
When we were first into this, maybe 30 days in, we got the first request from a system to actually do screening in common areas or in parking lots. And at first, we confused screening with testing, and we were like, oh gosh, do we want to do that? We got past the liability concerns really quickly, and then we began to accommodate that as much as we possibly could. But as far as good neighbors within buildings, we've actually seen some practices team up on that effort, because that's a staffing thing, that's an expense to do screening or testing. So that is an example of how I've seen practices within the building be good neighbors to each other and kind of share that load.
So you're saying so they would take turns basically offering a staff person out there in the common area to do the screening, or just
funding it. Like, maybe they're providing the personnel, or maybe they're going together in on a contract for a third party company to come in and do that. But instead of each of them, it kind of seems counterintuitive to have each of them test both at the lobby and once the patient gets to their practice. Like if they all collaborated and they got it done in one transaction, that's better for everybody. So we've seen a fair amount of that. A lot of our facilities are single tenant, just one practice. So that works for any patient coming into the front door of the building. But a great majority of our properties are multi-tenant. So that is again, a way that practices can work together and accomplish the same goal, but maybe be a little more efficient and save some money.
Good. These are some great examples and some good wisdom from what you're seeing across the country. We're going to take a short break and come back and talk about how CV programs can work with your company to access capital, as well as some other things. And so please stay with us. You are on MedAxiom HeartTalk, and we'll be right back. Physicians Realty Trust is on a mission to help medical providers realize better healthcare, better communities, and better returns. The company brings cost-effective capital to healthcare providers. Operating in an ever-changing healthcare environment, DOC's investment and management platforms emphasize flexibility and stability. To learn more, visit docreit.com. That's DOCREIT.com. We're back, and we're talking with Dan Klein and Mark Dukes from DOC today. We're going to talk a little bit about sale leasebacks. And Dan, how exactly does a sale leaseback work? And also, I'm just curious too, but the CV programs especially, how would they benefit? Like, what are these particularly used for? Is it typically a whole building, or is it, a rehab center? Give us a little.
Yes. We see the application to the CV world in either a kind of straightforward medical office building or an ambulatory surgery center, an ASC, as we would call that. And either of those are appropriate investments for us and appropriate vehicles for a sale leaseback transaction, where the seller, the provider, would sell us the building and structure a lease that worked for the seller and for us. And in exchange, Doc would then become the long-term landlord, real estate partner to that provider. That provider would get a lease that's customized and structured for their needs, and with the flexibility in it and the terms required to provide for solid, stable operations of that tenant over the long term, and then free themselves of the kind of burden of owning real estate, and let go of all the day-to-day management, the operations, the maintenance, all the things that Mark Dukes and his capable teams spend a lot of time on every day.
Yeah, I that is a great advantage for practices. I used to work with medical practices, and there were several I can think of where the physicians owned the building. They didn't realize how much time staff was spending on all those things that you mentioned about managing the real estate, in addition to trying to manage the practice. So it is a lot, and clearly you all have the expertise to really step in there. Speaking of practices, what is your role at Doc in helping practices thrive and grow as we unwind from the pandemic? Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, I'm part of a team that, and Doc, by the way, is although a $5 billion company, we only have, Mark Dukes will correct me, but 70 some people. Is that right, Mark?
That's right.
And so we're a small company. We operate like a small company, and we, most of our tenants that are physician groups are, similarly sized, and just not, they're not the biggest enterprises in the world. So we align with the pain they're feeling in trying to, run efficiently in an organized fashion. So in the work that I do, I'm on a team that would seek out those opportunities and sit down with the leadership of the group and say, hey, where do you need the help? Well, how can a real estate structure alleviate some pain that you're feeling or that you think you might feel in the future? And we begin that dialogue, and it can take a little bit of time, but we want to get to the right solution so that it works for the long term.
Great. Mark, what would you add to that from your perspective?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we have a team of people, leasing people, property managers, asset managers, who are charged with constantly staying in touch with all of our clients. At first, at the onset of this, it was just checking in to see if they were operating and responding to requests for rent relief and kind of managing through that process until about mid-June, where for most intents and purposes, everyone was back to full occupancy in medical office. Different story for other property types, but and we had a pretty nice period there where it was a new normal and everyone seemed to be operating at good capacity. They had the PPE situation figured out. And then we started actually getting requests for space. We are actually doing not just renewals, but new deals. And so it's been really interesting to watch. And now lately, because of all the recent surges, we're sort of back to checking in to make sure that people have what they need. And they're and as I mentioned earlier, just sometimes just calling to check in on folks and see how they're doing, because they are working long hours and 6-day weeks in some situations. But yeah, I think what we do in trying to make sure that practices are thriving and we find out if they have space needs, it's just a constant outreach program.
Great. It's always good knowing that somebody's out there. It's a lot of stress these folks are dealing with on a regular basis, like you said, 6-day weeks. And so the fact that you're checking in, it really speaks to, you walk your talk in terms of being a partner, it sounds to me. So
very important.
Final thoughts from you, gentlemen, for programs that are considering a partnership with a real estate investment trust, Mark? Well, Dan, let's start with you. What are some of your final thoughts if programs or providers listening are thinking about this?
Well, first, thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk with the MedAxiom team today, and we've enjoyed it a lot. Doc stands ready to help any of the MedAxiom members, providers with all things real estate. Our sweet spot is helping providers monetize real estate so they can deploy those resources into more mission-critical initiatives. As I said, we're long-term holders with abundant capital and a leading property management operational platform and a deep understanding of the healthcare space. So we think we make an excellent partner. And if you have an interest, we're happy to talk to you.
Great. And Mark, what would you add?
We've mentioned it a couple of times. So we live our vision of care and its components, and the R of care is respect the relationship. You know, we're proud to say we treat all of our clients and tenants as partners. We grow based on our relationships. We have trusted partners who look to us often in a first look or only look scenario that know that when they work with us, they can count on us to deliver, you know, get their patient practices up and running, keep people happy, keep ingress, egress going, wayfinding, cleanliness. This pandemic has proved that we've got the best operating platform. And as Dan mentioned, we've got the capital to help with practices that need to grow or establish and may need that capital elsewhere. So the relationship matters to us first and foremost.
Fantastic. This was a really great conversation. I enjoyed talking with both of you today. Thank you for your time. I know you're very busy, and we're glad you joined us today on MedAxiom HeartTalk. Thanks, Dan, and thanks, Mark.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thanks, everyone, for listening today. I have some news to share. I'm embarking on a new career journey that requires the bulk of my time, so I'll be taking a step back from hosting the show. I've learned a lot during my time as your host, discussing hot topics and having candid conversations with top leaders in the cardiovascular healthcare space, and for this, I'm truly grateful. And while I no longer will be guiding each episode, I remain a friend of the CV community, and I imagine this won't be the last time you hear my commentary on issues that matter to you. So until next time, MedAxiom HeartTalk listeners, be well.